Welcome to the Onstage Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Robert. Hello, welcome to another episode of Onstage Podcast. Today was an interesting day, actually. We actually have a lot of people who are going back to work. It seems, they gave us permission to do that, so I've been doing that, and that's pretty good. Apart from that, yes, today's podcast is going to be excellent. We have a really young podcaster here, and actually her name is Kylie Montigney, and I believe she's 14 or 15. I'm not sure how old she is, but I'll tell you one thing, this girl is really intelligent. It's amazing. Um, and so honored to be graced with her incredible talent and conversation. I'm sure it's a skill that can be developed through tried and tested means. And also, if you look at another young podcaster is Ty Poole of the Ty Ask Why, and Sammy J is a hot topic with her own show. But watch it, Kylie's here. It's going to kick you off the planet. So what can I say about her? She's got a host of her own podcast, Talk of Fame, that she started during the pandemic. She's also a host, reporter, and athlete, and activist from Scranton, Pennsylvania, which I haven't gone yet. I've been to Harrisburg, been to Gettysburg, but not Scranton for some reason. So, and she also started a podcast called Talk of Fame. It's a wonderful. She's actually at her 75th podcast, I think, and I hope she gets to her 100th first. So let's introduce her. Hello, Kylie.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good to see you. I'm so glad and honored that you are on our podcast.
Me too. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm so happy to be on here. Thanks so much for asking me.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm sorry to say that it's on a Friday night, and I know you like to do things with your friends.
Yeah, no worries at all.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, just so that people know who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Kylie Montigney. I'm from Northeast Pennsylvania, as he mentioned, and I am a host, reporter, activist, athlete, and I'm the host of Talk of Fame podcast and Real Talk podcast. I recently started like last month or 2 months ago. And I started Talk of Fame podcast during the pandemic in April 2021 because I was like, it's a pandemic. I'm bored. Like, why not just do something fun instead of watching television 24/7 on my time? So I'm like, I need to get off my butt and actually do something with my life instead of sitting down watching television. And I'm sure a lot of people felt that way during the pandemic since we had to stay at home and we couldn't really do anything and everything. So I was like, oh, why not just start a podcast as like a joke? I never took it seriously then. And plus, I'm a huge Gina Davis fan. And so I'm like, I need to do something. Like, she inspired me to be in this entertainment industry. And the work she does with her institute in acting made me want to start a podcast. And so I started it in April 2021, and we just hit a milestone of 1 year of the podcast. So now we have 73 episodes published so far. And so I'm going to be more grateful. And I'm also a women's empowerment activist. And so I empower young girls and women to basically be in an industry that can really be anything, and this to feel important in the world that they can really change everything. That's really the mission of my podcast, is to inspire young girls and women, to show them that you can be anything, don't care what other people think, and to feel inspired by other people and my guests.
Do you ever feel that you're going on top of a pedestal or something, even though that we should all be humble about what we do, even if we're doing it better than someone else? Like, do you think you're a best podcaster, a better podcaster? Do you just want to be one piece of your own?
Yeah, I'm kind of like that. I'm like, oh, why? I think I'm better than some other people, but just kind of get some good mindset. But then at some point, I'm like, God, I wish I was good at this person. It really depends on the day and the situation happening.
Yeah, I love how you do things, like the way you converse. I noticed that I watched the one with Avery White.
Mhm.
The views on that one is crazy, almost about 1,000 views. And I'm like,
Yeah.
who is she? What's going on here? I mean,
Yeah,
I
like
look at
I
all your
can't
views.
believe it at all. Like once I saw it, 1,000 views, I'm like, what the heck? Like,
Who is
what's going
she? Like,
on?
I mean, what's this going on?
Yeah, what's going on? Like that's my first ever episode that hit 1,000 views. And
Yeah.
then I have another episode that's about to hit 1,000 views too that I did early on last year when I first started. And it's absolutely crazy to think like, oh my god, like to think that like 1,000 people all around the world is watching this specific episode is like stargazing me. Like it's like a dream that I wish I could wake up from.
Well, why? I noticed that one of your guests actually knew Gina Davis. Why didn't you just kindly ask her and say, "Can you bring her onto my show?"
Like I kind of was like, I don't want to use this person to do that, but like I actually want to guess I knew her. She interviewed her on her own podcast called Allison Interviews, which I really recommend checking out. And you can listen to her on my podcast. I forget what episode, but her name's Allison Kugel,
Yes,
and she I basically listened to her podcast, and like when Gina popped on, I remember when we were scheduling the interview, I was like, how did you get Gina Davis on? So I was like, I kind of want to know like this
I
side,
know it.
like
Hey, Miss
why not
Kugel.
bother asking?
Well, that's the only that's the only way it's going to work. I was
Yeah,
trying.
you don't know until you're gonna ask and everything. So I was like, oh, how did you get Gina Davis on? Because I would like to have her on someday. And she was like, oh, her institute reached out to me or whatever. And I'm thinking to myself like, that doesn't help me a little bit.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you want Gina Davis on your podcast. I want Sting on my podcast.
mm,
So one of us is well, we both can have our dreams come true. You never know. But
yeah, you never know.
I know, and I know somebody who knows all these musicians, and I'm like, I don't want to say, hey, can you get me this? Can you get me that? I'm like, but what are you going to do for me? So I'm like, okay, you know what? I don't like using people in that way. Like
Yeah.
if I had a friend that knew Harrison Ford or something,
Oh, really?
no, I mean if I did,
Oh,
I know. I'm saying that I would say, hey, can you get me Harrison Ford? Like, no. But basically, I want to stick to I find my guests basically. I have like a team that finds them for me, and then they said, "Do you know about this young podcaster named Kylie Mutiny, whatever her last name is?" That's what. And I said, "No, who's she?" Well, she's got this Talk of Fame podcast. You should check it out. I checked it out. I'm like, "How old is this girl?" I'm like, so I'm thinking 14. Wow, okay, so let's have her on. You just turned 15, I think.
yeah, I just turned 15, about to turn 16 September.
Well, that's good. That's good. So, what would you consider to be your strengths and weaknesses?
Ooh, like in general or like for the podcast?
Yeah, let's try just for yourself. What do you consider your strengths and
I
weaknesses?
mean, my strengths and like weaknesses are kind of always doing things on time instead of doing all of these things late. I'm like a very impatient person. Like for example, like if I want to have people on the podcast and I send them a message and say like, hey, like I love it having you on a podcast or blah blah blah, all those information, and if I don't hear back, I'm like very impatient to myself, like, why is this person not answering back? Like, oh my God. I'm very impatient about it because I'm like, I really want this person to answer the message because I really want to have this specific person on. And sometimes I'll keep sending emails to have this specific person on. I'll be like, can I have this person on, please? Like, can you please answer my email just to follow up? Like sometimes like that's kind of how impatient I am. Like I don't know why, but it's kind of like something I'm like,
Because you're a young girl and they're always impatient.
yeah, I'm always pitching about something. I'm like, oh, I
Yeah,
want this, I want that.
yeah. Um, when I first started this podcast, um, I reached out. I figured, okay, I want to see if this works. I reached out to one of my guests, and she communicated with me immediately, and she said, "I'd love to be on." And then I thought, hmm. And then at first I thought, wait a minute. what if it's like her father or mother saying, "What do you want my daughter for?" You know.
Yeah.
And then I'm suddenly waiting in the bottom here for the video to come up of, and it was her, and I was jumping up and down, saying, "I can't believe it! I can't believe it! It's actually her!" You know. And then
Mhm.
from there I just started this podcast, and I had it under two names. And then someone said, why don't you just call it like On Stage or something?" So I just call it On Stage, and now I have a new logo and everything. But it evolves. Just like your podcast eventually evolve, and you might end up with 150, 200 podcasts. And one of them might be Gina Davis. There you go.
I'm praying. There's always hope. Dream may come true sometime, you know?
Yes. And I had, last year, I wrote 30 or 40 musicians, inviting them, and only 20 of them responded. So I have still another 15 or 20. You still need to respond. But, like I said, I'm not going to go, "Can you please be on my podcast?" I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, like I'm the person that doesn't like to beg about things. And like I just don't like to be annoying that type of way. And like if I really want to have this specific person on, I basically send emails like every week, be like, "Can I have this person on, please? Like, do you mind?" Or some like emails out like every couple of weeks or something to see like, "Oh, can I have?" Let's just say, I'm trying to think of someone. Oh my god, I can't really think of anyone. Let's just say Hugh Jackman, for example. And I'd be like, "Hey, can I have Hugh Jackman on?" And I would never get a response back. That's kind of how it works. Because like sometimes I'll be like, "Oh, this person's sending an email again. Like, don't bother answering. She's an annoying kid, just being a little stalker in that page and everything."
Why was your first guest? What's this guy's name? He's a baseball player, I believe.
Oh, Cooper Soros. He's
Or
a
Searles,
host
that's
of
it. Yeah.
Big Swing podcast. He does it with a baseball pitcher of the Blue Jays, Ross Stripling.
Why did you get him to be your first one?
Well, I was a big fan of him and Ross Stripling. I'm a Dodger fan, so I knew who Ross Stripling was. He was one of my favorite pitchers at the time, and still is. But like, I basically who knew like who Cooper was because I listened to the podcast they have. So I basically was familiar with what work he did with Ross, and so I was like, why not I send a message to him? Like I really like what he does. Like he's like a very big inspiration to me in what I do. I was like, why not send him a message? Just give a shot at it, and you may never know until you try. Unless you don't know, you don't think you're gonna get it. And so I was like, "Hey," he's like, "Hey Cooper, like I have a podcast and like I'm like basically starting this podcast and I would love you to come on a podcast." And he responded immediately to my message. And he was like, "Hi Kylie, yes, absolutely." And I was like, "Oh my god, I couldn't believe it. I was gonna interview someone I actually knew, like personally, that I was a huge fan of." So I was like very excited. And I really couldn't think of a better episode to start with than someone that kind of was familiar with and looked up to as a person. And so when I got to interview him, he was really sweet and kind of dealt with me because I didn't know what exactly I was doing. Because I kind of think, like, when I first started the podcast, I didn't take it seriously at first. I was like, "Oh, this is going to be the easiest thing ever. Like, it's going to be so easy. I don't really have to do any work. Like, this is the best thing ever." But I was wrong. Like, it's not easy exactly, but like he was really nice and I couldn't imagine any better. He like it basically turned out everything I kind of turned out to be that I wanted.
Well, how did you know that you were going to be a good podcaster? What if after 3 or 4 podcasts you said, I can't do this. It's just too difficult. How do
Like
you, like, you're at 74 now. Wow, that's more than me.
yeah, like it depends. Like at first I was like I don't know how this is gonna turn out. Like this is like I didn't think about it, but now like as I look back at episodes, I'm thinking to myself like, "Gosh, I did horrible the first couple of episodes." But like at first, like as time went on and I got more prepared and became more adjusted to what I was doing, I was thinking to myself like, this is actually pretty hard in terms of creating content, finding guests, hearing questions, posting on social media, promoting yourself. And it's very difficult than I realized. Is I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be so easy," but it's not. and at first it might be like a little easy to some people, but then at the end of the day, it's so hard when you think about it because like you have to do so many things to grow your platform and get listeners and do all these things. And it's like I think to myself like, why did I think it was so easy in the first place? Like I was thinking to myself that you're very dumb for thinking that a little bit, but like that's kind of how things are. Like you might think something's really easy, but then something switches and it's very hard.
That's amazing, Kylie. But how did you know? Like, look, you're on Spotify, you're on YouTube, you got 800 listeners.
Well,
When
I
did you?
got like a couple thousand now, but that was like an old little bio.
How did you know it was going to take off?
I honestly didn't know exactly. I was like, oh, let's go do these for fun, like as a, like, a little hobby. And I grew up with two journalists in my family from a local news station, so I basically have some experience with them watching on TV and everything. So I was like, oh, I have some of their genes in me and everything, and like I was like, I was gonna take this one step at a time, and as time goes on, my account will grow as time goes on. And so like once I realized that my account has like over 1,000 streams, like maybe even more, but I need to calculate everything. But I know it has like more than 1,000 streams. And I was like, once I realized I hit 1,000, I'm like, I can't believe my life right now. Like it's like a dream that I can't wake up from. Like I said, and it's like something I couldn't imagine
Hmm.
ever kind of being is huge because like I was thinking myself like, oh, I was starting this as a 14-year-old girl during the pandemic and everything. I never thought like it was gonna be like a full-time kind of thing. I just thought, oh, just gonna go do a couple times and just kind of get over with. And now I think myself like this is kind of what dreams are made of. Like to have over 1,000 streams, to have my own like fan base and like
Yeah.
listeners and have all these guests and make like friendships with them and everything is something I'll basically cherish the rest of my life. I really couldn't be more grateful.
Well, but why a podcast? Why not maybe set Avon, like buy Avon and sell Avon? Why was it a podcast? Why a podcast?
Um, well, specifically, I like was like it's starting to become very popular now during the sense of pandemic and a lot of people are staying home, and like I was always like I always like to ask questions to people. Like during the pandemic, I was basically writing down questions to my parents to see which parent knew me better. Which is now thinking of myself like, that's kind of stupid to do, but like I never think of anything of it. I never thought I would take it personally as a career. And so like one day it kind of popped up in my mind that it's like, oh, like my family's I have two journalists in my family. Why not just start a podcast and see if you like it? And since it was becoming so popular, like I was like, why not just start it? Like there are a lot of podcasts out there, and I'm sure a lot of people will listen, tune in since a lot of people like podcasts now and have a lot of time due to pandemic. And I was like, and asking myself like, why a podcast though? Like that's something I kind of was thinking I wasn't interested in. Yeah, I didn't really listen to that much podcasts except like I don't know, like two at the time. So I was like, I was kind of familiar with the whole podcasting platforms and all those things. So I was like, God, like I don't know about the situation, but like then I was like, I need to start this, and like this is something I think that would be good for me, and I love asking questions. I love connecting with people and all these things. I was like, I think this will be good for me to kind of socialize with people, get out of my comfort zone, and just learn more about people. And so then I started the whole podcast. But now I'm thinking myself like, now I still think, why a podcast still? Like, why am I doing a podcast and everything? But like,
Seems to be
like,
working out for you. Yeah.
yeah, it's like working out and everything. So I'm like proud of it.
Where do you find your guests? Mind me asking?
Instagram. I usually reach out to them through Instagram.
You actually private message them?
Yeah.
Okay, that's your thing.
Yeah. Wait,
How
how
was?
do you find your guests or anything?
Oh, I belong to a podcasters group where we find our guests, like the one that you are part of as well, and we're
Oh yeah, yeah,
so I prefer you not to mention it.
yeah.
But it is pretty expensive per year, and I decided to opt to pay for the whole year. And they have some really good guests on there, and
Hmm.
a lot of musicians. I like to stick with the theme musicians,
Hmm.
and I had a few private podcasts too, which is I have to edit them and then post them. Not all,
Hmm.
I do live and I do just record, and I can post them. I mean, it's quite easy when you edit it and you have to add things and but what about you? Like, how long does it take you? Like, when you get the guests to respond, is it almost immediately?
I mean, some people are respond immediately or basically a little bit after, but
Mhm.
most of the time people respond like a couple of days later or a couple of weeks later, depending on what people usually do or with their social media. Because not a lot of people check their DMs on Instagram. So like it really depends on the person, but mostly people respond a couple of days later for me.
Yeah, I've done that too in respects, but not everyone likes to be DM'd unless they say, yeah, just direct message me, and I do that. I invite them, and we do everything there, or email or whatever. But yeah, it's pretty successful. I just love meeting people and talking to them, and it helps me because I took like an effective communications course, and I'm like, well, how was going to work when we're all in quarantine, right? I
Yeah.
said, hey, why don't I just start a podcast? So I started like in basically I started in August, but I wasn't really serious about it until October, and it
Hmm.
started taking off, and I'm like, wow, it's like I enjoy it, and it gets me out of my comfort zone, and I can just now I can talk to people better and everything. It's excellent.
Hmm.
How would your family and friends describe you?
Hmm. I don't know. I think probably kind and caring. Probably it's probably something you'll describe me as. Is I really love and care for my family, and I take my family very seriously. My first priority, and my family often calls me the baby whisperer because I am great with kids. So they'll often call me the baby whisperer and stuff. And so I think my family would call me like kind of caring, probably. It
Well, that's
really
a lot.
depends on the person and
Yeah,
everything.
I mean, as long as they call you nice or whatever. I mean, like I've been called worse, but what do you do? What do you do when people misunderstand you?
What do you mean by that? Like
Like I have a
misunderstand?
friend who says I don't like being misunderstood. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? You just said a simple question, like "How are you?" and then you gave me the answer, and then you're getting mad at me because I didn't understand your answer. I was like, how do you bring your communication across? Did talking to people on the podcast get you to be a better, effective communicator with people? Can you talk to your parents or your siblings or whoever in your family better during the podcast? Was it the same as before?
I mean, like I grew up being really shy, so it really changed for me. But I feel like when I'm doing an interview, some people kind of get misunderstood about what I say, and I'm understood with that, and like I get misunderstood what they say. So it really happens to everyone. Like at first when I started, I didn't really say anything. I used to say like one word, I'd be like, "Oh, that's nice," or "cool," or "great." And I used to be, and now I'm like thinking to myself like I need to actually make conversation instead of saying like a one letter word. And so I was like, this is something that like I should kind of be better at and communicate because I was at that time I was so shy. So people kind of misunderstood that I was actually shy and have anxiety. And people think like people often ask me like, "Oh, Kylie, you're actually shy," and I'm thinking to myself like, "Yeah, like I was. I'm kind of am now, but it really depends on day and how I'm feeling." But people kind of get misunderstood about how I am and my life was and everything.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So let's talk about your great podcast now. What do you think? What makes you a great podcaster? What is it about you? Do you take a little bit of Kylie and put in a podcast? Are you a totally different person?
Oh yeah, so like It's really a mix of both things a little bit. Like I like to really show myself, like my experiences and throw it out there because like I actually want people to know about me a little bit instead of my guests. Like I kind of want to open about my experiences to help other people. But at the end of the day, I kind of act different a little bit, like I act more kind of professional a little bit because like I think myself like I can't act like my goofy self during an interview. They're gonna think like, what is wrong with this host? Like, why did the world did I join this podcast in the first place? So I kind of have to switch modes a little bit to like a goofy self to like a professional state of mind, I would say. So like I like therefore so I'm like a little mix of both a little bit in terms of like a podcast host, but like in terms of like my personal experiences, I'll always talk about it. And I'm very much open about anything and everything about of my life and everything.
Yeah, that's admirable. I recently just got a team now, so I got a design team for the thumbnails. I got someone that tells me how I am during the podcast, whether I should, wear a hat or remove my hat, or how so it's kind of helps. And then I have one that tells me how to write and communicate to my guests. And then I love it when they respond. And but it's this October. I want to say October, not August. Let's say October is going to be a year for me, and I really love it. It helps me talk and express myself and experience it. Just like you want to be able to become an effective communicator because you never know if you're going to be like president one day,
Yeah.
or it's good. A podcast helps you get along
Mhm.
with people, talk to people. Um, how did you come up with that name, Talk of Fame, and why is it musicians, songwriters, celebrities? How come I don't see this is so and so, and she's a chef? What? Why did you choose that theme?
Oh yeah, so the name came about when I was over at my sister's house, visiting my nephew, my 1-year-old nephew. He's about to turn 2 in August, and went over to my sister's house, and I was like, I'm thinking about starting this podcast, and like she's very good at making designing and figuring out things like social media and all that stuff. So I was like, why not ask my sister and see what her opinion is on these things? Because she's very good at this stuff, and I didn't know a clue about that stuff. I mean, I'm very good with social media, but I'm very bad about figuring out like a business and those type of things. She's really good at that. So I was like, Kara, like, can you like help me with this and like help me kind of start out a little bit, like help me create a name and all these stuff. And I was telling her, like, I was like, I want to interview celebrities, athletes, and basically anyone in the entertainment industry, no matter if they're like an author, actress, baseball player, like no matter what. I want to be about athletes and entertainment industry people. And she was like, how about Talk of Fame podcast? Because like she's like, that would be a great name since you really want to specify athletes and people in the entertainment industry. And they have a little bit of fame on their name for what they do. And and I was thinking to myself, like, that's amazing. Like I really couldn't have described it better because like that's really the definition of it. Because like some people talk about their fame a little bit and their experiences of what they do. So I was like, that would be perfect for a name for the podcast.
But I noticed that Cooper Searles is not a celebrity. He's well, I mean, I don't know if you call baseball players celebrities, but isn't he kind of out of place there because everyone is either a songwriter, musician, or celebrity. Cooper Searles is a baseball player. Does he? Is he a musician as well?
Well, he's only a podcast host. Ross is a baseball player.
Oh, I see what. Okay, so I guess if I want to have a chef or a construction worker on my podcast, I guess he'll have to have a podcast himself, right?
Yeah.
But have you ever heard of a 14-year-old Ty Pool of Ty Asks Why podcast?
No, I haven't.
Okay, and then you have Sammy J. She's like 19 years old and she started a podcast and she's getting like millions of views there. And as I mentioned before, Nate Eaton from East Idaho News, his daughter's 7 years old, and she has a podcast called 7 Questions with Emmy. And the disappointment with that is because I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan, and I got my like finances straight through him and everything. She had him on,
Oh, really?
Yeah, Nate Eaton has some power because he mentions like he's a newscaster and everyone knows him, so he can say, "I want Dave Ramsey," and boom, they got him. And
Oh,
I was just
wow.
shocked, like, "Can you get me Dave Ramsey?" you
Yeah,
know?
like, people can have
Yeah,
some power because they have like a lot of connections and everything.
yeah. I mean, I do have connections, and I'm actually really glad who I have on my podcast. It's my podcast. It's like it's a nice it's a nice platform, and we feel safe on here,
Hmm.
and just be able to have a conversation back and forth. Um, how long the like? Let's for an example, you had Gina Davis, but how many days or weeks or whatever do you have if they contact you today? Do you have them on the podcast tomorrow? How does that work?
It really depends on the person, to be fair. Like, it really depends, like, on their schedule and how, like, what they have going on works and, like, what they do for a living. So, like, if let's just say it's like Gina Davis per se, maybe they'll reach out to me and be like, "Oh yeah, she's interested on coming to the podcast. Like, let me know what day works for you, and we'll situate it out or whatever." And like, then like she'll probably schedule it for next week or next like couple of weeks after. So it usually happens really depending on their schedule and what they have going on each day. It's usually about maybe like a couple of weeks later, a couple of days later, then the least it's kind of least likely is going to happen the next day, really, because of the schedule and everything going on with their lives and everything. But it's mostly like you mostly book like a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, depending.
Well, I noticed that I'm getting quite busy too, and I already scheduled a podcast for August already.
Oh, wow.
And July is empty. It's like I'm actually pretty happy it's taking off, and I really enjoy it. And it's great because you get to talk to people, you get to ask some really deep questions, you find out that musicians what they do. Um, I talked to a guitarist about 4 months in March. I talked to a guitarist, and some of the things I told her about the guitar and stuff, she didn't even know, and she's been playing for like 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So, but she does know the type of guitar she has is a Jim Redgate guitar because there's a guy named Jim Redgate, and he makes guitars
Oh,
just
wow.
as much as Fender made the electronic guitar. So she's got an original Jim Redgate, and they're very pricey too. But she sounds really good. Just playing like this, really amazing.
Hmm.
So did you have your family help you with this? Are they the ones? Do you do everything? Like,
Yeah, I do everything by myself. Yeah, I do everything by myself.
so you're learning a lot, eh?
Yeah, like at first, when I first started out, I like didn't know anything about editing. So I was like, I need my sister to help me with editing. So she edited me with my video and show me how to edit. So I was like, I didn't know how to edit when I first kind of started out, but now I do, and I basically do everything on my own personally. But at some point, I may ask for help and ask for people's opinions on what I should do, based off like videos, content, all that stuff. But like I mostly do everything on my own for the podcast.
Yeah. I noticed that one thing is that when I do a record podcast and I edit it, that the file size gets bigger, and I want to add like layers and photos and pictures and wording, and what becomes a 2.5 gigabyte file ends up being an 8 or 9 gigabyte file. And
Mm-hmm.
one I had to upload almost 2 or 3 times before it would accept. And I'm like, but you keep doing it, and then you find ways to do it better. And I'm going to keep this up no matter, even though my computer broke, I'm still going to do it because I got 3 other laptops. So I can do it.
Yeah.
When people ask you, oh, you got a podcast, Kylie, why you're so young? What is it about? What do you say?
Well, I'll say like my podcast is like about like inspiring young girls and women. That's really my kind of definition. The theme of the podcast is to interview people throughout the entertainment industry and athletes, and some people I know because I know a lot of people in the entertainment industry personally. So I have some of my friends on and everything. So like when people ask me like what like my podcast is about, it's about like me interviewing and sitting down with my friends and some other people to inspire young girls and women. Because I'm very like I said before, I'm a woman empowerment activist, and so my goal in my life is to inspire young girls and women to show that they're meant to be in this world and they're meant to be inspired. Because a lot of girls are not inspired, don't feel inspired by other people, especially on television. Because on television, there are mostly more male characters instead of women characters, and they just don't see themselves on screens because all the male characters are doing all the great things, while a woman, well, like all women are basically like a housewife or the married woman, or they're dying in like the first like 5 seconds. So like there's not a lot of people that like find themselves on screen or just in general, and that's kind of how I was. I didn't find anyone inspiring. I never saw myself on screen, and I never found inspiration. I didn't never knew who I wanted to be, and I kind of thought like, oh, what's wrong with me? I should know what I wanted to be by now, and that's kind of something I kind of struggled with as a 15-year-old girl. But as time went on, I'm thinking to myself like, if I want to change that for young girls and women, then I can do it by myself and start a platform to help people with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. What even for the platform, I couldn't figure out between three softwares what I wanted to use because many of them like one did this, but the other one didn't, and I ended up using just Streamyard, which is one of my favorite tools because you just end up getting a small little link. It's not like Zoom where you have to give them something this large.
Mm-hmm.
One little link like the one I gave you. Boom,
Mm-hmm.
click on it. Boom, you're in. And I opted for it because it's good, and they always have a YouTube channel. They always have what do you call those? They teach you and train you, and they add things.
Mm-hmm.
Comments go right on the actual front so people can see it. I love it. Um, so all the guests and the celebrities that you have, how do you benefit from their knowledge? Like,
I
what do you
kind of
take
take
away
it
from it?
seriously, their experiences and knowledge into my life, and tell people about what they're like what they do. I listen carefully because I love to learn about everything going on. I'm a person that likes to learn about everything and anything. So I like to like learn. I'm like a learnaholic, I will say. And so like, I really take in about like what's coming from the person that's on, because like I've never been in that position of that person. So I want to learn about what they go through so I know, and I can tell people that ask me like, oh, how can I be a singer-songwriter, or how can I be an actress or something. I can actually mention what they gave to me as a host of a podcast and give it to them so I can help other people with their journeys along being in industry.
Do you sing as well?
No, I don't. I mean, like I don't. Like I like to sing, but not as like a profession, as to say.
You play an instrument?
Well, I used to play the violin when I was young.
Why did you stop? I love violinists.
It was something I never kind of like took, like something I never kind of like I saw myself in the future doing.
Yeah, what inspired me to want to become a violinist? Remember Little House on the Prairie? Remember Charles Ingalls? He played the
Mhm.
violin. I wanted to play the violin, and it takes a lot of practice. Like,
Yeah.
there's this guy who's a violinist. He has violin podcasts. All he has are violinists.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, like how many violinists? And yes, there's thousands of them out there. So I'm pretty amazed about that. So who was your favorite guest? Was it Avery White?
I mean, like she's one of my favorites. Like she's like on the top a little bit, but like there's really so many that I kind of felt impacted by. But the two like most that kind of impacted me was Madison Watkins and Caitlin Ways. Madison is a singer songwriter, and she was on American Idol last year.
Oh yeah.
And she's one of the top contendants, or I can't say the word or whatever. And Caitlin is not a child actress. Well, she was, and she worked on these like a lot of films and all these things. I basically like watched her on television a lot, so I knew who she was, and I was a huge fan of her and her work and everything. So I was like, I need to get Caitlin on. Like this will be a dream come true. So I knew her for a while in what she did. So I was like, it would be amazing to get Caitlin on. And I reached out to her and I was like, hey, Caitlin, like, oh, hope you're doing well. Like, it's okay if I have you on a pod. And she responded and was like, yeah, sure. And when I reached out to Madison, I knew her for a while as well from American Idol. I saw her on American Idol and everything. So I knew like who she was. And once I first saw her, I immediately became impacted by her. I was like, who is this girl? Like I just immediately, once I first saw her sing, I just immediately become touched by her. And so like once I found her on social media, I started listening to her music. I immediately started like to tear up a little bit. I'm like, her music really touched me a lot. Now, like not a lot of musicians touch me, but hers, what she did, and her music really like is really kind of similar to my life and my experiences. So that's kind of not often for me that I find a songwriter that kind of writes like similar to their life and kind of similar to my life as well. And so like I did the same thing for her, and I was like, hey Madison, like we talked a little bit before I reached out to her about the podcast, so we became kind of friends a little bit before I reached out to her and everything. So we talked a bit, and so I was like, hey Madison, like I just wanted to reach out to you and be like, hey, you want to come on the podcast or whatever? I'd love to have you on and everything. And she was like, of course. Oh my gosh, I would love to. And I was like freaking out. Because like I really like those were the two people that really impacted me and my work. And I was so excited. I kept talking. I was talking about it to my parents for weeks. I was so excited. And like once I talked to them, I was shaking so bad. I was like, oh my God, like this, like I really love these people. Of course, it'll be worse if I interview Gina Davis, of course, but like it's really what I really started this for. You know, like it's like if you interview some of your favorite people, it's something that you really could imagine doing. It's something that my younger self wouldn't be doing if I was young, because I was a very shy girl. So I would be like, oh wow, she's really doing this right now and everything. And she's interviewing some of her favorite people, which is something I never kind of thought of myself doing. And it's really something that I'm like proud of and something I can really be more grateful for.
How come you don't live stream your podcasts at least maybe once or twice or something? You just
Hmm.
prefer to record them and upload? Yeah.
Yeah, like, I think for me personally, it'd be like a little easier for me to kind of do because like and have like a little more time on my hands. Because sometimes I'll be like, oh, I was gonna get done with the interview that I posted a different day. Because I might have other episodes coming up, and like I really don't like to post like a couple episodes a day. I like to post at least once a day if I have interviews, depending. I'm a person that doesn't like post the multiple interviews a day, so yeah, I really kind of prefer kind of to record them instead of like, kind of streaming it because a lot of people probably don't prefer kind of performing a live stream. They much prefer kind of just listening and watching it and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's not bad editing it. Like I've edited a few already and uploading them, and I find that a lot easier as well. So I do
Yeah.
both. So sometimes mine have 1 month I had 9 podcasts. Like, oh wow, you
Yeah.
know, it's quite a lot, but I don't mind. I love it. I love it. So do you like write a script? Where do you get your questions from?
Well, I usually do my research. I used to like write down their like work or whatever. Be like, hey, this is a singer songwriter, blah blah blah, and like write down the questions. I don't usually like make a script because like I just think like I was going to hang it as I go, like just wing it and everything. Sometimes, like as like a journalist, I'm like thinking myself like other questions to ask them based on what they're saying. So I'll always based off the paper, I'll ask them questions. Because as a journalist, as long as I've been doing this, I always figure out questions in 2 seconds. So I'm very good at thinking of questions very fast. So
Well,
I'm always the type of person that likes to think and on asking questions and everything.
yeah, we're going to talk about your journalism in a second. Um, is there? Oh, okay. I see that. I think that's all the questions for that part. So you don't wing it. You do actually script.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I do both because I know that whatever questions I ask, I can ask and repeat and sometimes I don't know if you ever heard of Pat Quinn, but oh sorry, no, it's Pat Quinn, Pat Flynn,
Oh.
and he's been doing a podcast 2009, and he says that when somebody asks a question, you can get several questions out of that one answer.
Oh, wow.
So you can have like 10 questions, and you can have a podcast that lasts 3 hours because someone will ask a question, then they will say something, and then you say, "Really, you did that?" Yes, and then so
Yeah, that's kind of how I am. Like if they mention something about like what they did, I'll ask them a little bit more about
yeah,
it.
that's good. I like how you do things. It's actually that's why I decided to subscribe, because it's good to learn from other podcasters as well. Okay, so now we want to get into your journalism here. So what gives you the motivation to do that? Like, what news story have you done? Give us an example.
Like the motivation that kind of gives me a little bit about doing a podcast and keep going is to know that I'm impacting a lot of people in many ways. That I'm impacting a lot of people in many ways about like my anxiety story, depression story, or with the podcast about like singer songwriters and all those things that might inspire them to become a singer songwriter or be in the industry. And that's what really keeps me going is that I'm really touching a lot of people on my life personally because I'm a twin sister. So my brother's always the center of attention. I'm always like a little shadow of him, and I always hated that. And to think like I'm impacting a lot of people, and a lot of my brother's friends are reaching out to me and be like, "Hey, I love your podcast." Like things like I like my brother really told me about you, and you're amazing. And I'm thinking to myself like this is really amazing to know that my brother's friends really know what I do exactly and not everything that he does makes it all about him and really not acknowledges what I do exactly. And not being one person the center of attention, make a little knowledge on me a little bit really means a lot. To think like a lot of people reaching out to me and being like, "Hey, I love your podcast," and all that stuff really means the world. And is the reason why I'm still doing this. Is to know that I'm impacting so many people means like the world to me.
You just keep on going. You're going to end up having 100 podcasts, because what are you at now? 74?
74 about, yeah, 74,
Do
almost
you
74.
ask you? Do you use Zoom, or what program do you use?
Yeah, I use Zoom. Yeah.
You use Zoom. Yeah, that's a product that's pretty difficult, but I don't like it because it has the large link.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Streamyard is just one little thing with a key. Boom, done.
Hmm.
That's why I chose this one. Um, do pe- well, let's go back to talking about your podcast. Do guests actually reach out to you, or do you always have to reach out to them? And do you
Well, it
consider that?
depends. Like I mostly reach out to them. Like mostly all my guests I reach out to, but some of them reach out to me saying like I would love to be on a guest on a podcast.
Well, with over 1,000 listeners, definitely. Would you consider podcasting same as journalism? What's different about the two?
I mean, it's kind of similar a little bit, I'll say, but like I personally think it's a little different because like a podcast is something you can really talk about. You can really talk about anything you want and all that stuff. But in terms of journalism, like you kind of like for some people, you basically have to make you have to basically talk about this, or you're supposed to talk about this something going on. Let's just say like the Johnny Depp trial going on right now, and like your new news station is basically making you talk about write a story on the Johnny Depp like, trial. And so that is kind of something a little bit different from the podcasting world. Is that like you basically have to do it, but it's kind of similar to some people a little bit. But I think it's like a little different in a little couple of ways. But that's kind of like a little example, kind of how much kind of different it is.
Yeah, and you have to research your guests, and you have to have a mindset for that. Like you have to do a lot of research, because that's why I realize when I watch one of your podcasts, you go right into the question, whatever made you want to be a singer songwriter, whatever, and then the guest says, "Oh, and then they start in on. But your podcasts are very short, though. Some of them are between 14 minutes, and I think you had one that lasted an hour and a half and stuff. And I guess it doesn't matter how long the podcast is, but
Yeah, I kind of keep it like a little short, like in the middle. It depends on the interview to kind of like there's some people don't have a lot of time and everything. So I was like, I was gonna keep it a little kind of short, depending on everything going on, so people can actually have time to listen and tune in and everything.
is your is your whole entire room pink, or do you have a pink light?
Oh, it's just my room behind me is like a pink wall. Like
Um,
the LED lights might look like pink, but like only two sides of my wall are a little bit pink.
Eventually, I'm going to get a green screen because I took a picture of my friend's living room, and I'm going to use that as a backdrop.
Oh, really?
Because right now that's all I have, and I have my head covering photos and important things, so that like even that one there, you shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, and so that's interesting. So even where I work, I have to have the same mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I never wanted to be a journalist, but I did do a lot of short stories. I wrote a lot
Mm-hmm.
of short stories, and I took one of my favorite movies when I was like 12 or 13, and I actually wrote the whole movie out through memory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I my mind was like I was really going 100 miles per hour back then. Like I was even when I was like 12 or 13, I was doing a lot of drawing, a lot of art, a lot of reading. I wrote my own science fiction stories. It's sort of something I don't really do now, but I should have kept it up. I could have had a book published right now.
Yeah.
But kind of, this is excellent. I want to talk about your activism. What's your activism? For what?
Yeah, so I am an activist or women's representation for
Oh,
in the basically in the entertainment industry, kind of like I said before, and I basically advocate for women in the entertainment industry to feel inspired by if you get inspired. But specifically in the entertainment industry, women don't get a lot of roles, especially people over 50. Women don't really get any roles. And especially with Gina Davis, like she didn't really get roles that much. Like since she's over 50, she didn't get that much roles. And like during the 2000s, she only had like 2, 3 roles throughout like a 10-year generation. Now I'm thinking myself like that's nuts. Like she's 65 years old right now, and she hasn't had that many roles. I'm thinking myself like, why in the world you're not doing this? And like there's not a lot of female characters that make a strong impact. And like male characters do, male characters are always doing the interesting things, like being a president or CEO or something, and women's always being like a housewife or they die in the first 5 minutes or just something like that. And they're not always doing interesting things. And think to myself like, how about you like write a character that actually does something interesting, like being an actress, like doing like your experience on being an actress, or maybe being a president, or like a CEO, or something kind of similar to what a male was doing. And think to myself, like, why in the world is all males getting all the parts, but not women? And it's something that's been going on for years now. It's nothing really new. And so I always kind of like every once in a while when I sit down there like watching a movie, I'm thinking to myself like, why is not a lot of women in this scene? There's always like a lot of male in this scene, and so like you need to see a lot more women. Like there's not a lot. Men is always on the screen than women. Like the men are always like 75% or maybe even higher of the movie or around that percentage, and women don't even stay in the movie long. Male always have the scenes longer, and women always have the things short. And so they don't have like a lot of scenes that actually kind of show more women and everything. And so and I would recognize that. I'm thinking to myself like, why is all the male always doing the good characters, but the woman's being a housewife? And I'm thinking to myself like, and sometimes I'll look at my mom and we're watching a movie or something. Myself like, do you think the woman can do that, or do you see that there's a lot more male characters in this scene than women, and that do you think the woman can do that too? And I shouldn't really be teaching my mom these things, and my mom should really be teaching me about these things. But like, it's something that I've really been like take very seriously, and I really like, talk about it often. And people would not really see it, and think to myself like, I'm not crazy. People probably think, oh, what's wrong with this kid? She probably like something's wrong with her. And think to myself like, it's not like it's it's something that's really you should take seriously than not. because like it's really not a lot of people take it seriously, and people think, oh, men deserve all these roles, and like women don't deserve anything because we're women. I'm thinking to myself like, women have much potential than you know. And that's really why I started my podcast, is that if I want to change the world for women throughout the entertainment industry, then I need to do something about it. And that's why I really started my podcast, to really create change for young women and girls.
You're very passionate about that. Talking about Gina Davis, I remember watching, I believe it was two or three of her movies. One was called Angie, which I liked. She was
Yeah,
young.
Angie, yeah.
And A Long Kiss Goodnight was one of
Mhm.
the best action films I've ever seen.
Yeah, I love that movie.
I couldn't see any other actress in that role
Yeah.
than Gina Davis. And to tell you the truth, not only is it my favorite movie, I think it's on Amazon, and but my father liked it, and yeah, we said that we just love the movie. I love the movie. How
Yeah,
she started out as
that's
a
one of my
regular
favorite
housewife.
movies. It's really amazing.
Yeah, as she started out as a regular housewife. I don't want to give it away in case people see it, but she is a regular housewife, and then you find out what she used to do in her past life
Mm-hmm.
and what she was forced to go back to. It was amazing. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you think about uh, pay equity? Like, should women and men get the same amount of pay in a job?
That's a good question. I mean, like for that, like there's not a lot. Like men are always kind of getting paid more than a woman. Like, let's just say like the women's soccer team, U.S. soccer team, for example. Like the men's soccer team was getting more paid than a woman, and a women's soccer team like was like, why are they getting more money than us? Like we're the U.S. soccer team, like we should be paid like equally instead of them being paid more. And that's really the example of why men are being treated better than women. And so like they really went to court and won to get equal pay. Like last year, it's recently actually, and like to think that like equal pay and all that stuff. They myself like if you're getting paid more than the other person that is a male, and like you are doing the same position and the male is getting paid more than you, I'm thinking to myself like, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you getting the male paid more and you don't want to pay that much for a woman because she is in the same position? At least like make a little similar payroll, not like make the male a higher payroll than a woman.
Okay, what if let's give an example. Okay, you got a Bob and you got a Linda, for an example. Linda went to university to get a BA, a BSc, a PhD in drawing and creating doodads, which when you put in a robot, the robot will act more human. And then Bob, he only got the BSc and he got the Bachelor of Science, but he doesn't know anything about doodads. He doesn't know anything about robots, but he can repair your TV set. Who gets the job?
The woman says she has more experience.
That's right. But now, but some people are saying, well, I know, but some people hire the guy because they're saying we want a guy for this job, not a woman.
Yeah, that's what people think. Like a woman don't have that much potential. They sometimes say like, "Oh, a woman can't do this," but like, if she is really good at what she does and has a lot of experience, then she's good for the job, no matter if she's a woman or not.
I'm not really against women and men having equal pay and everything. I'm actually for it, but I just don't like the fact that, like for instance, feminists.
Mm-hmm.
When you learn about what real feminist is, even though men, like I like women bosses, and I like just that, you remember that song, anything you can do, I can do better, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and you have the strength of a woman, you have the independence of a woman. In fact, um, I believe it was Destiny's Child that sang that song,
Mm-hmm.
Independent Woman or something, was over
Oh
that
yeah,
Beyonce, I can't remember, was it
yeah. I think it was
Independent
independent
Woman?
woman.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm for it. I love your passion. That's excellent. What about veganism? How do you feel about that?
Whew. The way I kind of feel about veganism is that we use kind of food from animal products, which is something that I'm very against because I love animals. I have some animals, I have 3 dogs, so I'm like against it because I'm obsessed with animals. So like, and so like I want to keep animals safe and love and being loved in some type of way, not being against. So I'm kind of like a little against it because I'm obsessed with animals, and I think they should be protected at all costs and don't be killed just to be food.
So, are you actually a meat eater? Do you like eating meat, or are you actually? What are you? What
Like
are
I
you?
like eating meat. Like I'm a person. Like
But
I
you
like
just don't want
animals.
the cow killed in front of you. That's the only thing.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
my friend has the same. He's a vegan, and he says, "Well, you show love to your cat. Sorry, Han, I'll have to feed you later. You love your cat, you love your dog, but in other countries they have pigs, chimpanzees, gorillas for pets.
Mhm.
And then do you have other countries and other places and farms where they have like cows and donkeys and chickens for pets? Like I had a friend named Ruth, and when we were younger, she had a pet lamb and a pet chicken. The lamb she called Baba, which was interesting. And the chicken, I don't know what the name, I think it was Clucky or something. But when the chicken died, the mother didn't say, okay, now we can eat them. When Baba died, and said, okay, now we can have lamb chops. They treated us as a member of the family. And my friend is like saying, well, you like to eat pork, you like to eat um, cow meat and everything. So why don't you eat your cat? So it's just sort of like, it's different, is it? Would you
Yeah.
want your fruit killed in front of you? No.
No.
I'm just saying that I'm not a vegan, but um, if I had to eat vegan food, I would eat it. Whenever I go to a restaurant with them and it's vegan, I would eat vegan. I love vegan. And then
Mhm.
you have people who don't like veganism, and they make fun of them saying, "Oh, I wish I had a ham sandwich right now." It's like it's
Yeah, I
ridiculous.
mean, at some points I'd be like, oh, I will eat something that's kind of vegan, but then at the end of the day, I'm like, I kind of don't like it. Like, why are they doing this? Like, what the heck?
What more do you think can be done to change our attitude towards how we connect with animals and nature and get women equal pay and stuff? Putting
Yeah,
animals
like
and
I
women
would
together.
personally think like if you want to change things with animals and stuff, like if you just need to love them and actually care about the animals. Because I'm an animal lover. I always been, never will stop being that. And still like this thing that like if you really want to like take care of animals, don't kill them when they're still alive. Because like they literally like they're more than that. Like they have a life to give for you. Like if they're dead, then that's a different story. But like that's kind of like a different story. But for like equal pay, I just think people should really take seriously on what you're trying to do. Like people should really think like, oh, how much are the men getting paid, so I can make the woman as much as paid as them, and like this make them feel represented. Because like if you don't do that, then like what are you doing? Like you're just making things worse. If you don't do anything about it, then it's gonna keep getting worse from there.
Well, both Paul McCartney and Chrissy Hine from the Pretenders are both advocates for animals. They're both vegans. They don't like animal products, and they're still testing them on animals. And what are you going to do? Like, you get, we have a chicken place, and you had activists that stand in front of the restaurant and say, we will no longer allow you to bring um, frozen chickens and to cook to give to people. They call them dead friends, dead pets, I guess they would call them. I'm not really into that. I mean, like, I do have a certain activism on my own. Um, During the pandemic, even the gloves, I found a lot of people taking their gloves and just throw them on the ground. And I remember going around and I counted like 50 to 60 vinyl and latex glove on the ground. I used to make those at a factory when I was younger. I know how they're made, and I know that latex is not biodegradable,
Hmm.
and they're just right on the ground. I got pictures to prove it, and you might, if you go and check my Instagram, you'll see it. There's a few pictures there, and it's ridiculous. A pandemic caused a lot more waste. And
Hmm.
what do you think of Greta Thunberg? Have you done some research on her? She says
Oh yeah, yeah. I saw. I did some research of her today.
she
She's
said we can't save the world by playing by the rules. because the rules have to be changed. Everything needs to change and it has to start today. What do you mean that? What does she mean by playing by the rules because the rules have to be changed? What are the rules? What do you think the
Like,
rules?
like for me personally, like if you play by the rules, you don't change anything. Like if you try to change the world, but you're still care about like what other people think, and you're basically copying this specific person what she's doing. That's basically playing by the rules and what they're doing. You need to try to find like a different perspective on what they're doing, and like and try to figure out how your activism can actually be a little bit different, but the same as what they're doing. And so, like, if you actually want to play by the be different and actually change your world, then you need to change your world, not care about like what other people think.
Yeah, Greta Thunberg, Sarah, when she was 16 years old, one day in Sweden, she was just leaving school, and she stood there while she was leaving with her backpack as a schoolgirl, and she was thinking, "This is crazy. I had enough of this." And then she just started. On Friday, she would protest.
Yeah,
First
yeah,
she
yeah, yeah. I
she
saw that.
protested, and now she won't even take a plane. Her and her family, especially her father, they all have to go travel by boat to get from one place to another.
Oh
She won't
wow.
even take a plane because of the stuff that comes out of the plane polluting the air. I
Mm.
mean, like, I don't know if she's messed up or not. Like, I did follow her for bed, and I'm like, well, this is ridiculous. She's getting into points where she doesn't want to take a plane, and just, I mean, there's always an activist or someone out there. She also said that this is not the time and place for dreams. This is the time to wake up. This is a moment in history where we need to be wide awake. Can you explain that one? What do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah, like that. I kind of think that one as like if you were dreaming about something, go chase it. Don't like live in that dream. If you don't chase after it, you're not gonna go anywhere. It's not gonna come true. And that's why I started my podcast. And like, if I want to interview Gina Davis, I have to go after it. If I don't go after it, then most likely not gonna have her on. And so, like, if I don't chase in what I want to do, like, let's say, like, I want to have some guests on that I really want to have on, then I need to actually have to chase and reach out a couple times and see if they can come on. You see, if you don't make it, if you don't reach out and do things to make that dream come true, it's not going to come true, most likely, if you don't make change for it and make things happen.
Why didn't Alison Kugel just offer to give you, because you during that little podcast you were mentioning about Gina Davis, and I checked out Alison Kugel and I found out that she actually knew Gina Davis. I'm like, why didn't you just ask? I mean, I'm pretty sure that if you do things properly, you'll get Gina Davis on your podcast when the time is right.
Yeah.
Allison might just suddenly email you and say, "Hey, by the way, we have Gina Davis is interested in being on your podcast." See, that's the right time. But like, I mean, I have family who know celebrities, and I myself know a celebrity. And I asked her if she could be on my podcast because she's also a singer. She said she would, but it's been like 5 months. Um, you heard that if you're watching, so hope that you will let me know that you want to be on my podcast.
Yeah.
I won't give her name. And I also have a friend who has all these different people that she used to sing with, and um, I'm a fan of Reba McEntire.
Mm.
If I wanted her on my podcast and I knew someone who knew her, I wouldn't say, "Hey, can you get me Reba McEntire?" I don't do that. I just like, if I'm going to get
Yeah.
Reba McEntire, I'll do it properly.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, "Hey, by the way, you know my family, whatever." She goes, "Yes, I do." Well, so why didn't you just ask them to, and they could have gotten me on? I said, well, I wanted to do it right. I wanted to follow protocol. I don't want to haul and scream. And I know I've been so patient for certain people to have guests on my podcast, and that because they appreciated that so much, they actually said, I want to be on.
Mm.
And I had no problem. I didn't even have to claw and scream or whatever. And I'm pretty happy about that. So now we're going to do the final questions. You ready?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, what's your final word for your listeners?
The final word I'll give to my listeners is to keep going and never and dream big, because if you need to dream about something, if you don't want to make your dream come true, then you need to work for it. That's really the only thing, is to work for it. Because I personally did worked for my dreams and some of it came true. So if you don't work for it, then you're probably not gonna make it come true. So I really, and if you are working for your dream, just be patient because it takes time to get your dream to come true.
You know, just letting you know, the second or the third guest was Lucy Kay. You might have seen her on Britain's Got Talent.
Mm-hmm.
You reach out to her and ask her to just invite her onto your podcast. She'll say yes. She's really nice.
Yeah, I try it. I reach out.
Just type in Lucy Kay, and her website will be in there. And then you go to menu and you go to contact, and you'll get her email. She's very nice, but
Yeah,
she's
I
living
can
in
reach
Norway
out.
right now. But try it out. But it will take her a while to respond. But she's nice. And if anybody of my listeners out there knows Reba McEntire, can you please get her on my podcast, please? Please.
Yeah, that's why I do. Because if anyone knows Gina Davis, get around Gina Davis.
Hey, if I knew Gina Davis, I would have told you a long time ago. She would have been on your podcast.
Exactly. I'm actually friends with her son.
Are you really?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I'm friends with her son.
Why didn't you just ask him then? If you're
Yeah,
friends with him.
I'm the type of person like I just
I
don't want
know.
to kind of think to myself like that's a son, like I just don't want to mention his mom and everything, like because he probably gets annoyed because his mom is Gina Davis. And he probably gets a question. And I just kind of don't want to go that far, you know?
Well, it's sort of like if I let's I this is just I don't know this celebrity. Let's just pretend I know Mark Hamill or something, or I know SVU, my favorite show. I know Mariska Hargitay or whatever, and I could just pick up the phone and call her. Um, if I told somebody that I know Mariska, the first thing they do is they befriend me, be my best friend just to get close to her. And you got to prevent that too. I know people who know celebrities, but I'm like, I would love to have them on my podcast, but like I said, like you, I don't beg. I just
Yeah,
like,
like I just don't want to beg. Like I just actually want to be friends with her kid, like not actually use him for his mother. That's kind of not the person
yeah,
I am. Like
yeah. And what I'm kind of funny is that your her son didn't even mention it. Like if he had seen your podcast, he would have said, okay, well, let's, hey, mom, check this girl out. You should be on her podcast. Or Alison Kugel should have done it. All I'm saying is that I know that someone told me that, hey, you can use me. If you want such and such, you want such and such in your podcast, do it. And I'm like, no, I just offer it. Offer the person.
mm-hmm.
Offer the person. So if someone said to me, hey, you want Sting on your podcast? I say, let me see if I have a little, I don't know if I have time. Let's see. We can put him maybe in August or September. Yes, I won't. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I'd have him on tomorrow if I could, but I'm not the type of person that like if I'm the big like I'd love to have Sting on my podcast one day.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a big fan of Train. I like Pat Monahan. I reached out to him 5 months ago and he hasn't responded. So, but I'm not like, hey, sending like 70 emails. You think this? Okay, you sent me 70 emails. Okay, I'll comply. No, he'll send the police after me and say, why are you harassing this guy?
Yeah.
So I say, you know what? One email is enough.
Yeah, one email is enough for now.
um, oh my goodness, I wrote that question down twice. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Oof, that's a good question.
I know.
Like that's a hard question too, a little bit.
Yeah.
The thing I kind of want to be remembered for is I don't know. This is so hard. Like there's a lot of things I'm thinking about on top of my head. I think I kind of want to be remembered for kind of changing people's lives. I'll say because that's really my goal is to impact people's lives and really make them happy with my platform. It's probably the thing I'll say.
Have you had any of your guests reach out and say, Kylie, what you've said really changed my mind about something, or what you've told me, or what you mentioned really got me think? Have you ever had anybody of your
Yeah, I
guests?
had a couple of people actually say that a little bit.
There you go. So you do change lives. So there you go. For me, it was only just when some girl she looked like she was going to kill me if I said good morning to her. I just smiled and said good morning. I found out later in the afternoon that she was upset because for the whole week nobody said good morning, nobody talked to her. But someone like me comes on and says good morning, it changed her entire life.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, but I'm not saying I'm going around changing people's lives.
It can make people's day even better.
You're part of the family, and I got siblings who love me, and of course, I've changed their lives because I'm the youngest in my family. Same with you. You and your brother are twins, and we got twins in our family, and yeah. So, what about that? Do you have any regrets, Kylie?
Of course, like, everyone has regrets. I have a million regrets, so personally, absolutely everyone has regrets about
Okay.
some things, but
Is there a regret that you can share with us?
whew,
Ooh.
I don't know. Like, I kind of wish I could really start the podcast earlier in life. It wouldn't be shy. Like, I was always a very shy kid and always stopped myself from doing things. I kind of wish I kind of tried some things and never got my shyness against me and get to me and everything. That's probably one regret I have.
Yeah, that's a journalism in you. Yeah, responding to all these questions. It's I really like the research you put into them, and yeah, you're going to go somewhere as a
Thank you.
journalist. Uh, but before we end, I'd like to ask you what kind of journalism you want to do. Like, where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
Who? I don't know. That's a good one too, and a hard one. I'm a big sports fan, so maybe sports broadcasting, maybe like the sports broadcasting, or maybe do the same thing I'm doing now, but in the entertainment industry, maybe be on like ET, like seven news outlets or something, maybe something kind of thinking about right now,
Well,
probably.
if you, you're going to follow your dreams. You probably will end up behind the cameras for a newsroom or something. You are going to get Gina Davis on your podcast. You're going to go places. Especially in your young life, like you're only like 15 and you started this podcast when you're 14, and it's successful. 800. Well, you said 1,000 listeners now.
Yeah, over 1,000. Yeah,
Do you prefer to do the audio or the video?
both. Like depends. Like I prefer both.
I'm thinking of starting an audio podcast for something totally different
Oh,
because
really?
yeah, just where I can have anybody from um, everyone has a story.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe have a podcast or tell me the story about, why are you a chef? Well, I was a chef because when I was younger, my mother used to make this and that and that. And, you know, okay, so let's see. I gotta make sure I ask. Well, actually, I said I wasn't gonna ask you everything. Okay, I'll ask you this one. I don't think I asked you this one. And then one that, what do you do in your downtime? Like, what
Oh,
do you do?
wow. Yeah, like I like to listen to music a lot on my downtime or watch movies and television. Like I like to watch Netflix. So I like to watch a lot of Netflix or going to or hanging out with friends and going out and stuff. And I like to go to sporting events, obviously, with my dad. Me and my dad go to a lot of sporting events. So I like to go to that in my free time too and this kind of travel because I love traveling. So I love to go out and do all these things traveling related and everything.
Well, that's excellent. And basically, yeah. So with me, that's right. You said that you're going to join volleyball, I think.
I might. Like I don't think I'm gonna do it now, but like I was kind of like at that time I was like, oh, I'm gonna start playing. I was playing and like in the team tryouts already started and I was already prepared. So I'm like, well, I guess I can't do it this year anymore. Like I don't know.
Actually, you're talking about how back in my day, it was unheard of to see a woman play hockey in the NHL. Then
Hmm.
you had um, Riom, Manon Riom, I think her name was, and now you've got all these women joining hockey, which I
Hmm.
think is amazing because
Yeah.
why not be equal? Give them the same amount of pay. Like they may know more than the guy.
Hmm.
It makes no sense, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, you're going to change it. When I find out that women and men are equal in this world, I'm going to be thinking, Kylie did that. Kylie did that. Excellent. I'm so happy that you were able to grace our platform today, Kylie. It was a pleasure and honor, everyone. Just please hit that subscribe button and also go to Talk of Fame podcast on YouTube and start watching and listening to Kylie's podcasts. And she's now in, you release how many episodes a week? 2?
Yeah, like at least like 1 or 2. It
One or
depends on interviews stuff. So about like 1 or 2 mostly.
And you're gonna be at 100 pretty soon.
Almost
And
at 100. Very close.
so go to her podcast, listen to her podcast, see how she does it. She puts a little journalism in there. She puts a little of her mind thought, her passion. She's amazing. She's got like the passion and the thought process and intelligence of a 40-year-old as a 15-year-old. I'm actually pretty happy about that. Okay, thank you, Kylie. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say goodbye.
Right, bye guys.
And
Thanks so much.
so I'm going to put up this, I'm going to remove you from the screen, and then we're going to say goodbye, Kylie.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.